I'm going to read you a story from a book that I've had since I was in elementary school. It came from the Scholastic book order, and it remains one of my favorite books. It is Favorite Greek Myths. The Weaving Contest, the story of Arachne and Minerva. Arachne, a proud peasant girl, was a wonderful spinner and weaver of wool. The water nymphs journeyed from their rivers and the wood nymphs from their forests just to watch Arachne steep her wool in crimson dyes, then take the long threads in her skillful fingers and weave exquisite tapestries. "Ah, Minerva must have given you your gift," declared a wood nymph one day. Minerva was the goddess of weaving and handicrafts. Arachne threw back her head. "Ha! Minerva has taught me nothing. I've taught myself everything I know." And with that, she decided to challenge Minerva to a contest. "Let's see which one of us should be called Goddess of the Loom," she said. The nymphs covered their mouths, frightened to hear such scorn heaped upon a powerful goddess of Mount Olympus. Their fears were justified, for Minerva herself was furious when word got back to her about Arachne's conceit. The goddess immediately donned the disguise of an old woman with gray hair and hobbled with a cane to Arachne's cottage. When Arachne opened her door, Minerva shook her gnarled finger. "If I were you," said the old woman, "I would not compare myself so favorably to the great goddess Minerva. I would feel humble toward her and ask her to pardon my prideful arrogance." "You silly fool," said Arachne. "What do you mean by coming to my door and telling me what to do? If that goddess is half as so great as the world thinks, let her come here and show me." "She is here!" boomed a powerful voice, and before Arachne's eyes, the old woman instantly changed into the goddess Minerva. Arachne's face flushed with shame. Nevertheless, she remained defiant and plunged headlong toward her doom. "Hello, Minerva," she said. "Do you dare to finally weave against me?" Minerva only glared at the girl as the nymphs, peeking from behind the trees, cringed to watch such insolence. "Come in if you like," Arachne said, stepping back from her doorway and bidding the goddess to enter. Without speaking, Minerva went into the cottage. Servants quickly dashed about, setting up 2 looms. Then Arachne and Minerva tucked up their long dresses and set to work. Their busy fingers flew back and forth as they each wove rainbows of colors, dark purples, pinks, golds, and crimsons. Minerva wove a tapestry showing the 12 greatest gods and goddesses of Mount Olympus. But Arachne wove a tapestry showing not only the gods and goddesses, but their adventures also. Then she bordered her magnificent work with flowers and ivy. The river nymphs and wood nymphs stared in awe at Arachne's tapestry. Her work was clearly better than Minerva's. Even the goddess Envy, who haughtily inspected it, said, "There is no flaw." When she heard Envy's words, Minerva lost her temper. The goddess tore Arachne's tapestry and hit her mercilessly until, disgraced and humiliated, Arachne crawled away and tried to hang herself. At last, moved to a little pity, Minerva said, "You may live, Arachne, but you will hang forever and do your weaving in the air." Then the vengeful goddess sprinkled Arachne with hellbane, and the girl's hair fell off, and her nose and ears fell off. Her head shrank to a tiny size until she was mostly a giant belly, but her fingers could still weave, and within minutes, Arachne, the first spider on earth, wove the first magnificent web. Yesterday, I got back from a camping trip, which was not a camping trip, it was a glamping trip. I was invited out west by 2 wonderful people who do this regularly. They love doing it. And I flew out to Seattle, and we drove the vehicle with a trailer hitched to it up into the islands. We took 2 ferries, and they set up a beautiful canvas tent for me that had a stove in it, like a wood-burning stove, and lanterns they didn't use electric lights or batteries. They had oil lanterns and a cot that had a duvet. It was really wonderful. I made some scones over an open fire in a Dutch oven using my skills that I learned from Pioneer Village from how to cook over an open fire. And the scones, I was scared that it wouldn't work, but it worked, and they were delicious. One afternoon when we were all in my tent, Will saw a spider, and he just he said, "Oh, there's a spider on the cookies," and he picked it up and he let it outside. And I happened to have this book with me, Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is one of the 2 books that I took with me for evening or morning reading in my tent. And this book is the origin of this book. My childhood book of favorite Greek myths is the same stories, but they're sort of boiled down to the essential and told in a very simple way that's palatable for young people, for children, really. And each myth is accompanied by a beautiful painting. I just think this book is fantastic. Favorite Greek myths. But it was not too long ago that I realized I would love to read the originals written by Ovid in, well, he was born in 43 BC and he died in 17 AD. So that's when this is from. And that day after Will released the spider, I thought, oh, I wonder if Arachne's story is in this book. So I just made a mental note. We all had dinner, we all went into our tents and went to bed. I had lit the fire burned all night, and then went out while I was sleeping, and I woke up and it was cold and pitch black in the tent. So I found a way to light the lanterns. I lit the lanterns, and then I started my fire again, and I got back into my cot in my pajamas, and I pulled out this book, and I found the story of Arachne and Minerva, the original story. And the wonderful thing about reading Ovid's stories is that I'm now ready for them. I'm now ready to read the much more poetic, detailed versions of these myths that I love. The great thing about Ovid is that there are the simplest lines in here that you can easily just pass over. And yet those lines speak to what it means to be a human. And the beauty, the sorrow, the pain, the frustration, the despair, the ecstasy, the condition really of being a human. And that's the real brilliance of these ancient texts that have become classics. They sum up these feelings that we often have, that sometimes feel like there are not words to describe them, and maybe there aren't words to describe them. But a story has a wonderful way of capturing the feeling. So that's every now and then when I'm reading a bit of Ovid, it's brilliant because there's something in there that is like a little gift, that it speaks to my existence and my experience of life. I'm going to read you a little part of the story of Minerva and Arachne, now that you know the story. So this is at the beginning of Ovid's version. Often the nymphs used to leave the vine-clad slopes of their beloved Tmolus to admire her work, and the river nymphs came from the waters of Pactolus. They enjoyed seeing the cloths, not only when they were completed, but even when they were still being woven. There was such grace in Arachne's skillful movements, whether she was winding the coarse yarn into balls in the first stages of her task, or working the stuff with her fingers, drawing out the fleecy cloud of wool with constant handling into one long soft thread, or whether she was twirling the slender spindle with deft thumb, or embroidering the finished material. when I read that, maybe it was 4:30 or 5 a.m. in my tent. I don't know. I didn't turn my phone on. I refused to. And it was dark. I was so cozy. The fire was crackling. I was a little overwhelmed because what was described was something that I had done for 10 summers, working at Pioneer Village, using the fleece from our sheep. I did all those things, and except embroidering the finished material. I didn't do that. But I didn't do that with the wool. But in those long, quiet hours of working with wool at Pioneer Village, I learned so much about myself. It was that quiet contemplation while working that gave me the opportunity to think, to have my own thoughts. We were not allowed to have any devices around us. So we were in these buildings often alone. We were doing things, and we were doing things with our hands. And in the task of turning raw sheep's wool into thread and then into yarn, I learned that there could be a grace. There could be a grace to the way my fingers moved. Sometimes I would train someone and I would watch them early on, and it would be endearing and amusing to watch unskilled fingers do the same tasks, like going like this with the carders to brush out the wool, and then kind of grabbing the wool to take it off of the carders, and then starting the spinning wheel and not being able to keep up with it, and sort of jerky movements. But with time, with practice, with many, many, many hours of repetition, the movements would become fluid and graceful and beautiful, almost like a dance of the fingers and the hands. And we have lost so much of that as a race because we don't do many of these things by hand anymore. So often when I have the choice between doing something by hand or choosing the mechanized version, usually I think most people will agree it comes down to time and efficiency. Why would I do this when I could do it this way and save time? Great. True. But I often ask myself, well, what am I going to do with that time that I saved? And what am I losing from not doing it by hand? What is lost when you press the button and you just do it in a mechanized way? Well, for one thing, the version by hand, something we don't think about is the sound. Sounds are produced that are much more palatable and comforting than the sound of a machine doing it, which is often not pleasant. It's offensive sounds, frankly. And we're so used to it. We're so used to these sounds from machines on a daily basis that we don't even really think about it anymore. I ask you to think about that, because if you think about that and then you make the choice to do something by hand because it's slower and more beautiful, I do believe your day will change. One of the things that I had to purchase a few years ago, I needed one, was a pepper mill. I needed a black pepper mill. And I thought I was going to buy the Peugeot pepper mill, this wooden device, fill it with pepper and you grind it. So I went to Williams-Sonoma, looked around, saw the Peugeot pepper mill, picked it up, and from my Marie Kondo training, I've learned how to do this. I picked it up and I asked myself, does this bring me joy, holding this thing? And I wanted the answer to be yes, but the answer inherently was no, it doesn't. And the rule, this Marie Kondo rule, is if it doesn't spark joy, you cannot have it in your life. So I put the pepper mill down and I thought, now what? Now what am I going to do? Because I'm really a part of the Marie Kondo cult. I follow the rules. I don't deviate from them. Well, I try not to. I do have the storage locker. Anyways, I'm rambling. So the pepper mill, I didn't want to buy the pepper mill. So I was looking around, and then I found this. This is a mortar and pestle, and it is made by Milton Brook established 1810 in England. It's like a classic mortar and pestle. The handle is wood and the rest is ceramic. Listen. Sometimes when I need pepper and I'm in a big rush and I don't have ground pepper, I just don't have pepper because I'm like, ugh, damn it, I don't have any pepper, and I would have to pound it in the mortar and pestle. So I just do without it. And that's not great. However, when I do make the effort and have the time, even if it's just 10 seconds, to put the peppercorns in here and grind it, there's an experience. There's an experience of my hands moving and the sound that is pleasant and I think beautiful. And if I'm sort of anticipating needing pepper quite a bit, then what I'll do is I'll put a lot of pepper in here and grind it all and put it into a little canister, which I then use here and there. That's the way I do it when I'm smart. However, that's all to say that this very old way of grinding a spice has become such a wonderful part of my kitchen practice. It's a tiny thing. And there's another line in this in this story, when Minerva actually shows up at Arachne's cottage and they decide, well, they challenge each other to this contest. Ovid writes, with their garments tucked up beneath their breasts out of the way, the goddess and the girl worked with all speed, their hands moving skillfully over the looms. In their eagerness, they were not conscious of the labor involved. Into the cloth they wove threads dyed in purple, Tyrian copper, shades of color differing so slightly, blah, 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 blah. So when I was in my little tent, so cozy, and I read that line, that was the line there it was in Ovid. I could have just missed it if I would have just kept reading the story and not really catching the brilliance of these myths. That's one of those hidden gems. In their eagerness, they were not conscious of the labor involved. There have been so many times that line applies to me in all different disciplines. Most recently, there was a night, I was with Guy Wolf in Connecticut, and we were making something during the day, and they had to dry, and we had dinner, and then we did the dishes, and we said, oh, let's go check. Let's go back to the pottery. It was like a chilly night, fall night. We walked to the pottery, maybe it was 10 p.m., and we fell into the spell of joy working with the clay. It was just at the right time to work on what we needed to work on. And in our eagerness, we were not conscious of the labor involved. You know, I think that is, that's the sort of thing that these myths are all about. They're written to show us more. Show us more about what inevitably we as humans will be doing at any point in time, 2,000 years ago or today. The things that have not changed. Work, how we do work, the pride we take in work, the humility we should have when we know we do great work. Working with my hands has been something that I've always been drawn to do as a little child, and it has never left me. And the older I get, the more I recognize the opportunities to make the choice to work with my hands. I'm not saying that in order to have this feeling, you need to learn how to do pottery and you need to play the harp and paint watercolors, because those are the only things that you can do with your hands. No, I'm saying recognize when there's an opportunity to use your hands to do something that is so primitive and primeval and ancient, but it's a task that needs to get done, And by choosing to do it with your hands, you engage in something that is so old, and you can take pride in it. That's what I'm saying. It has brought me so much joy and a feeling of being truly fulfilled by understanding the importance of doing things by hand.